Being trustworthy. When we speak, honesty counts the most. Deceit and lies are unacceptable. It is better to talk a little than chat too much. Tell the truth. Do not speak insincerely. Cunning, deceptive speech, and foul language should never be used. We should never conduct ourselves in an unruly manner. Whenever we speak, we should always be truthful. Lies, flattery, and exaggerations are wrong. They can mislead others and cause serious problems for those who believe the untruthful things we say. Clissa's moment of truth. Clissa never had her hair done before, but then she had never graduated from school before either. Her long year of studying had paid off. She was getting the lightness of the year ring. Her parents said that as a special treat, she could go to the You Grow It, We Style It beauty shop to have her hair done. Thrilled, Clissa poured through all the latest magazines and found several with layouts on lions. She found a hairdo she fell in love with, and wanting to surprise everyone, she hid the magazine. On graduation day, her mother drove Clissa to the beauty shop. She asked if Clissa wouldn't like her to stay, but Clissa rolled her eyes and said, "Mom, I'm graduating today. I'm a big lioness now. I'll catch a bus from here to school and meet you and Dad there." Her mother kissed Clissa on the cheek, which got another eye roll. Then a giggle from Clissa, who quickly kissed her mother back. Clissa entered the shop and was taken to the shop's most popular hairdresser, a monkey named Esmeralda. Esmeralda looked at the magazine and then at Clissa. "Honey, this is a pretty funky hairdo, and I mean funky. You sure you want this?" "Oh, yes, ma'am." Clissa's turquoise eyes sparkled. Esmeralda exclaimed, "Well then, let's get to it." And she began to wash, cut, color, blow dry, brush, and band Clissa's hair. When she was all done, she handed Clissa a mirror. Studying herself, Clissa asked, "Do you like it?" "Sure, it's just like the photo," Esmeralda replied. Clissa left the shop and caught the bus to school. Getting off, she saw her friends. She ran up to them and asked, "Do you like my new hairdo?" They looked at each other and mumbled, Sure. Great hairdo. Love it." Next, Clissa saw her lion friend, Trislan. As he looked at her hairdo, she asked, "Do you like it?" Trislan swallowed and paused for just a second before saying, "Very nice." Clissa saw her parents and ran over to them. "Do you like it?" Her father seemed at a loss for words. Just as her mother began to speak, the principal called out for everyone to take their seats. Clissa ran to her chair without hearing her mother's reply. Soon, the speeches were finished, and it was time for the students to go on stage to receive their diplomas. Clissa was shaking the principal's paw and accepting the ring when suddenly one of her rubber bands broke. Then the other two snapped as well. Clissa's hairdo was out of control, with hair going in every direction. Horrified, she ran off the stage. As Trislan and her friends came up to her, she cried out, "Why didn't you just tell me it was a stupid hairdo?" They all said they didn't want to hurt her feelings. Well, Being embarrassed in front of everyone in town is a whole lot worse. Next time, tell me the truth, please. Clissa's friends and Trislin apologized. Her mother brushed out her hair, and her father said, "Thank goodness, let's go eat." When others ask us what we think, we should honestly and politely tell them. We should not readily talk about something we have not seen, for it may not be the whole truth. We should not readily pass on to others what we do not know for sure. If you don't know something for certain, telling it to others can create big problems, whether you are on land or in the water. A different kind of fish dinner. It all started innocently enough. Mr. and Mrs. Trout were at the annual company dinner. Everyone had finished their salads and was waiting for the soup to be served. Mr. Bass turned to Mrs. Trout. "You've heard about Mr. and Mrs. Dolphin, haven't you?" Mrs. Trout replied, "No, what about?" "Well, they're getting a divorce," Mr. Bass informed her. Mrs. Trout was shocked. "A divorce? I can't imagine it. They're such a wonderful couple. How did you hear of it?" Mr. Bass confidently told her, "I heard it from Mr. Flounder, who heard it from Mrs. Turtle." "Oh dear," said Mrs. Trout. "I wonder what they will do about their beautiful house." "I hear they're going to sell it. She's moving back in with her mother while she looks for a job. He's going to ask for a transfer to another department. He may even leave the bay and move somewhere else." Mr. Bass certainly did seem to know all about the dolphins. As the soup was served, Mrs. Trout turned to her husband and told him the news. Mr. Trout then passed it on to Mr. Cod, who was sitting next to him, and pretty soon everyone at the dinner heard the news. The wait persons also heard about it when they were serving the food and clearing the dishes. They, in turn, told the kitchen staff. So soon everyone in the restaurant knew all about the dolphins and their divorce. Then, to everyone's amazement, the dolphins entered the dining room laughing together. As they took their seats, they explained that they had gotten caught in traffic. Mr. and Mrs. Trout and all the others were befuddled at how happy the dolphins seemed. You'd never guess from their behavior that they were getting a divorce. Then it happened. Mrs. Jellyfish couldn't stop herself. She looked at the dolphins and tearfully blurted out, "I'm so sorry." The dolphins looked at her. They had no idea what she was sorry about. Mrs. Dolphin gently patted a tentacle and said, "There, there, why are you sorry?" "Your divorce. Everyone's talking about it," cried Mrs. Jellyfish. Mr. Dolphin dropped his soup spoon. "Divorce? We're not getting a divorce. Where did you hear that? In fact, we're about to sell our house and buy another to be closer to Mrs. Dolphin's parents. And after I get my promotion, we're going on a trip." Silence fell. Everyone stared at their soup and thought about what had just happened. It was a case of Mrs. Someone telling Mr. Someone, and everyone believing what they heard. Mr. Trout stood up and cleared his throat. "I want to apologize to both of you. I repeated a rumor. Next time I'll check before I talk about others. I hope you will accept our best wishes for your good news. I also hope you'll forgive us." Mr. and Mrs. Dolphin smiled at their friends, and Mr. Dolphin said, "Apology accepted. and thank you all for your good wishes. Please enjoy your dinner. Everyone was greatly relieved. Unless we know something to be true, we should not repeat it to others. If someone asks us to do something and we are not sure whether it is appropriate, we should not carelessly promise. If we do promise to do something and it is inappropriate, we will be wrong whether we keep or break our promise. Sometimes people we know will ask us to do something, and we will not be sure if it is appropriate to do. If we promise to do something without finding out whether it is proper, we will very likely end up being wrong no matter what we do. On the other hand, if we do what we promise, we will be wrong if it turns out to be improper. On the other hand, if we break our promise, we will also be wrong. So it is very important to think carefully before we promise to do something. And if at all possible, we could check with our parents or a responsible older person first. But what if the people are asking us to do something right now? What should we do? We can ask ourselves if this is the sort of thing our parents taught us was okay to do, or if it's something we were allowed to do before. We can also ask ourselves what our older brother or sister would do, or if it is something they had permission to do at our age. If we are still unsure, then it is much better to explain that we cannot promise until we check with a parent. Not giving an answer right away is much better than ending up doing something wrong or breaking our word. When speaking, say each word unhurriedly, clearly, and correctly. Do not mumble or talk too fast. Some people like to gossip and comment about the faults or good points of others. But if something does not concern us, we should not get involved. If we want people to understand what we're talking about, we need to say every word clearly and properly. We also need to talk at a reasonable speed and loud enough to be heard. Too loud, and we will be annoying. So too, if we mumble. Once we know how to speak properly, we need to be careful of what we talk about. For example, gossip. What exactly is gossip? When we gossip, we are talking about someone's personal affairs. Like when we tell someone else that we heard a friend was grounded for staying out too late, or how another friend had his phone taken away for texting too much. Since we are talking about something personal, we are gossiping. But what if it is something good we are talking about? What if we were talking about a friend who is going on a camping trip with his dad? Is it still gossiping? Actually, it is, because it's personal and it is not our business. Is there ever a time we can talk about others without it being gossip? If we say a friend is a great ice skater and we hope to be as good one day, then we are not gossiping. Why not? Because now we are involved, and also we really do know what we are talking about. When we see the goodness of others, we should encourage ourselves to learn from them. Even if we are far behind them, gradually we will achieve as they have. When we see the faults of others, we should reflect on our own behavior. If we have the same fault, correct it. If we do not have this fault, we should always be alert and not make the same mistake. It's always nice to see others do good deeds. We may see a friend helping a pregnant woman carrying her shopping bags, or we might see our neighbor carefully putting a bird's egg back into the nest. Seeing these things, we might tell ourselves we could never do something like that. It was easy for others, but not us. Or we may find an excuse, like we are in a rush, or we would not think of it in time, or someone else would do it. But like us, our helpful friend or neighbor probably shied away from doing good deeds at first. He had learned from others, so we too can learn from watching and learning from others. Over time and with practice, we will be the one others want to be like. But what if we see others doing something wrong, like laughing about how others look or hurrying to get in line before someone else? Often, the annoying things that others do are the same things we do. So we need to think before we criticize others. Instead of telling others to change their behavior, we need to work on changing ours first. And if we don't have that bad habit, we need to be sure we never develop it. When our morals, knowledge, and skills are not as good as those of others, we should encourage ourselves to try harder. If the clothes we wear and the food we eat are not as good as what others have, do not feel sad. When our abilities and knowledge aren't as good as others, we shouldn't give up on ourselves. Instead, we should do our very best to be like those we admire and respect. And as for being sad when different, Larsland found a way. Not your usual asagy. No one knew how it happened. Some thought it was because his mother loved to go to the museum and looked at all the beautifully colored paintings. Others thought it was because his father loved to read science fiction. Still others quietly said it must have been a gene from a long-forgotten ancestor. But whatever the reason, Larsland was not your usual asagy. His parents tried to hide their shock when he was born. But since asagy are very aware of the feelings of others, Larsland knew something was wrong. He just didn't know what it was. At least not until he wobbled over to the stream to take a drink and saw his reflection. He saw he was a lovely warm orange, just like his parents. But as Larsland's eyes focused and he looked more carefully, he saw a bright blue spot just above his nose. As he bent closer for a better look, he saw another blue spot near the top of his head. And then he saw there were more on his legs. Larsland blinked and then looked up at his parents. No, they didn't have any blue spots. And from the look in their eyes, Larsland began to feel that he shouldn't have any either. His mother came close to him and licked his face. Then his father came as well and stood awkwardly by. Larsland looked more closely at him. He couldn't see even one blue hair. Larsland told himself that maybe newborns had blue spots but lost them as they grew up. He consoled himself with this thought for a few days. Then his cousins came to visit. They were the same age as Larsland, but not one of them had even the tiniest blue spot. Since adult asagy have extremely good manners, Larsland's aunts and uncles managed to completely hide their emotions. But his cousins were young, and like most children everywhere, they didn't have the best of manners. Having been warned by their parents, They tried not to laugh, but it was more than they could manage. One by one, they started giggling, and before anyone could stop them, they were laughing out loud at Larsland. He tried very hard to be brave and to not embarrass his parents, but a tear rolled down his cheek, then another, and soon, with all his cousins laughing at him, he burst into cheers. Larsland ran off into the tall grass and threw himself down in it. Even though his aunts and uncles hushed his cousins, their laughter still rang in his ears. Larsland began to think that maybe his spots would never go away. He told himself that it wasn't his fault. He'd been born this way, but what if maybe, just maybe, he would be different for the rest of his life? His sadness was more than he could bear. He tucked his head between his front legs and sobbed as though his heart was broken. He was so miserable that he didn't hear his parents approach. It wasn't until his mother nuzzled him with her nose and licked his face that he realized they were there. But this time, there was no shock in their eyes, only love. Larsland couldn't see this at first because his own eyes were filled with tears, but he felt their love, and it was wonderful. Gradually, he stopped crying. His mother was now lying in the grass in front of him. His father was standing over them both, as if trying to protect his son from ever being hurt again. His mother looked at him and said, "Larsland, we want to be very honest with you. When you were born, we were shocked because we had never seen any of our kind who looked like you. We didn't know what to do, so we consulted the elders. They searched their books, but could not find any record of an Assagy with blue spots." Tears began to well up again in Larsland's eyes. His father cleared his throat. "Son, those who are different have two choices. They can allow the laughter of others to cause them to be sad, or they can realize that all animals are different in some way. Some animals are unusually short, while others are fat. Others are not very bright. Some are not as athletic as others of their kind." His mother continued, "Whether you are happy or sad depends on what you tell yourself. The elders declared that you are very special. But your father and I already knew that. At first, we didn't know what to think. Then we realized that the way you look doesn't matter. Who you are is what is important. Please know that we love you," she smiled, "and your blue spots." His father concluded, "There will always be some who laugh at you. You can feel sad or you can understand. We are all different in some way, some more noticeably than others. But son, being different does not mean that one is inferior." Larsland understood. As he stood up, his mother also rose. Along with his father, they went back to the aunts, uncles, and cousins. But now Larsland walked proudly. Yes, he was different, but his parents loved him no matter how he looked. His cousins apologized for their laughter. They shyly came over to look more closely at Larsland. Up close, they realized the blue spots were actually very beautiful. As Larsland grew up, he became famous, but not because of his blue spots. Larsland became famous and loved for his kindness and for his willingness to befriend all those who were laughed at because they were different. If criticism makes us angry and compliments make us happy, we will attract bad company, while good friends will leave us. If we are appreciative of criticism and uneasy with compliments, people who are virtuous, sincere, and trustworthy will gradually become our friends. Good friends want what's best for us. So when we do something wrong, they'll tell us. They do this not to make us feel bad, but because they truly care about us. They want us to become better people. Because we trust our good friends and their judgment, we listen to their criticism. We also know that good friends praise us at times because they know we deserve it. We can trust that our good friends aren't saying nice things just to get something from us. They're trying to encourage us to do even better because they know that's what we are striving to do. But what if we only want to be flattered? And worse, when we are criticized, we become angry. We'll never keep good friends if we behave this way. And to make matters worse, because we dislike criticism and always want to be flattered, we'll begin to attract people who are insincere and untrustworthy. We'll find ourselves surrounded by people who flatter us because it suits them to do so. To be sure this doesn't happen, we need to appreciate it when our good friends criticize us. They are the ones who truly care about us. If we accidentally make a mistake, it is only an error. But if we do it on purpose, it is definitely wrong. If we correct our faults and mistakes and do not repeat them, then they will cease. But if we try to cover them up, we will be doubly wrong. If we did something wrong but didn't mean to, then it was only an error. Maybe we tried to catch the ball someone threw at us, but we missed it. Or we really wanted to bring our math book home, but we forgot. These are honest mistakes and anyone can make them. But if we make a mistake on purpose, then we've definitely done something wrong. Maybe we don't like to play baseball because we're not very good at it. So we missed the ball on purpose, hoping the coach would leave us out of the game. Maybe our math homework was really tough. So we hoped that if we couldn't do our homework, the teacher might excuse us this time. It's important for us to figure out whether we made a mistake by accident or on purpose. Why? If they were mistakes, then we need to think why we made them and how to correct them. To become better at catching balls, we could practice with our brother. To remember to bring our books home, we could make a checklist or put aside the books. Then they'll be ready for us when we go home. But what if we did something wrong on purpose? Here also we need to think about why we behaved in such a way. Were we feeling angry? Were we unhappy, tired? Did we want to do something else instead? Figuring out why we make mistakes takes effort and courage, but this figuring out will help us become happier. In what way? To stop making mistakes, whether by accident or on purpose, we need to understand why we make them. As we make fewer mistakes, we will naturally relax and worry less and be happier. So instead of not being very good at catching the baseball, with practice, we could become the person everyone wants on their team. And instead of dreading the next math exam, having studied with a friend who is good at math, we will walk into class knowing we were well prepared for any questions. But if we try to cover up our mistakes, not only will they get worse, we will have made another mistake. Then we'll be doubly wrong. So the best thing for us to do is admit we made a mistake, figure out why, and decide how not to repeat it. This is how we improve and become happier.